What's happening, y'all? Wolfettes, welcome back to the California HQ of Bunkbed Breakdowns. I got another episode of Market Watch Mondays for you. But before we get into it, I just want to give you a quick intro. So this is an interview I did with Drew. It was a long one. I'm going to edit it and see how it turns out. But, it wouldn't shock me at all if it's in the hour and a half to 2 hour range. So totally understand if you don't have the time. But I promise you it is jam-packed with information. Drew's someone that I have a ton of respect for. I've engaged with a bunch on Twitter. He's one of the reasons why I actually moved to DLF back in the day, because I wanted to kind of get some insight and just pick his brain. So it was really cool to kind of get some insight into his Bulletproof process. We talked process, we talk his background, we talk how he came up and built everything from the ground up, and then we also get into the rookie class, man. We get into the players, the guys you care about, the wide receivers, quarterbacks, running backs, a little bit of tight end, because most of them don't really matter. And then, we also have some fun questions from you guys on the viewers. So, hope you enjoy. Again, make sure you follow me at Mike Me Up with 2 P's on Twitter or Instagram. And then also, make sure you subscribe to the Bunkbed Breakdowns channel and hit that thumbs up. All right. Before we get into it, man, you guys know what time it is. Hit that intro. Let's get it. What's happening, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Market Watch Mondays. I am your host, but today I am joined by a very, very special guest. If you follow me on Twitter, hopefully you would have already seen us engage many times. I have Drew. Is it Osinchuk? Is that how you say your name? Okay,
Yeah,
so Drew Osinchuk.
you.
I didn't even practice that, believe it or not. I just read that off the cuff. But Drew at DF Bean Counter on Twitter. If you guys don't know what bean counters are, they're accountants. How do I know this? Because I used to be an accountant, and I am hence a former bean counter as well. So no surprise that Drew and I get along really well. Drew, first of all, thanks a lot for coming on the pod. I've been wanting to have you as a guest for a while now. You and Ray and a couple others were on a short list that I think would just bring just incredible insight into a strategy-based podcast like this. But yeah, man, how you doing? You're dealing with some kids over there. You got that Canadian beer that you were telling me about. I'm drinking Lagavulin myself. This is my drink of choice. How's everything going on your end?
Everything's going well, man. Yeah, the kids are, I think they're off to bed now, so we should be in the clear. But you hear the door crack open again, it's probably one of them.
Love it. If they want to make a little cameo on the pod, don't mind it at all. I would like to see what the future of analytics holds for 2035 or whatever it is that they decide to jump into this stuff. I met you just kind of randomly. I mean, I actually started following you before I met you. I joined DLF, and you're one of the first guys I kind of DM'd about even before I joined, just to kind of ask, what it was like, how you like being there. So, you and Peter Howdy are probably a couple of the main reasons why I actually joined DLF, because I felt like, I'd go over there and pick the brains of a couple of brainiacs and hopefully make myself smarter in the process. But maybe give others a little bit of a background into one, how did you get started in this whole fantasy thing? Obviously you have a very successful Patreon with a lot of stuff. I'm in that community. If you guys are looking for a good resource, I highly recommend you go and sign up, because Drew's dropping knowledge. It's just a great group of folks in there as well. But maybe just give my listeners a little bit of a background of how you got started in this whole fantasy thing.
Well, I started playing Dynasty, and I was really bad. And I started listening to podcasts to try to get better. And I found one on Dynasty League Football called Filmetrics with George Kritikos and Nick Whalen. And then they had a guest on there named Matt Kelly. From Player Profiler, who I'd never heard of. And he sounded pretty smart. So I jumped on his website, and then I really wanted to win, I guess. So I bought everything he had, which at the time included a concierge service. So you could basically ask him questions. It was predating the Patreon phase. So I emailed him one day about Evan Ingram. I was like, hey man, I've been hearing people talk about Evan Ingram as a wide receiver. What would he look like as a wide receiver? You should have somebody do an article on this. They'd be pretty cool. I had no interest in writing. I didn't know how to write anything. I wasn't meaning, hey, I would like to write an article. I was meaning, get one of your writers. You have a whole bunch of writers to write an article on this. And he replied with, hey, that is an interesting idea. If you commit to writing the article, I'll get you the numbers. Yeah, so I tried it. Wasn't very good, if I'm being honest. But it was exciting. It was my first time. And 2 days after the article went up, Matt Kelly had a podcast, as Matt Kelly does, and he immediately just tore me to shreds over this article I wrote for him. And I was like, wow, I guess my fantasy football foray has come to an abrupt end. And then I just didn't write anything else because I didn't really want to be honest, before he had ripped me to shreds. But then afterwards, I was like, I can't do this. And then the next year, he like started emailing me again, like, hey, do you want to write some more articles? And I'll try some more, sure. And then I started writing some, ended up going from there to DLF. And then it's actually kind of a funny story with Patreon. I couldn't get into the ranking service at DLF because it was full.
Mm-hmm.
And people had been asking me for rankings. So I was like, you know what? I'll just set up a Patreon and we'll see where it goes. It was like $1 a month. And I did rankings. And they were okay, but they're a lot better now and a lot more informative now. But I started doing it and it just kind of kept growing. People kept signing up. And here we are.
It's awesome to kind of see that. I know you have had some success doing that. I know Ray's had some success doing that. Patreon, you know, it's just a great way for, you know, creators like us that don't really understand like all the stuff that goes in the back end of creating a site. And, you know, kudos to anyone out there that can do it. I know Angelo at FF, like he kind of started out and just built his own site, which is incredible. But for those of you like Drew and myself who have zero talents in that department, you know, you can always kind of lean on something like a Patreon. And yeah, I did take a little bit of the cut, sure, but I think, you know, they kind of take away a lot of the administrative bullshit that most people have to deal with so that you can kind of focus on the stuff. And if you guys, you know, have not been on Drew's Discord, the Bulletproof Patreon, I highly recommend you do check it out. You'll see it in the bottom left, like below his name, under his handle. You'll see the tag there. It's at patreon.com /DF bean counter. I'm surprised you didn't use Bulletproof. Is that taken? Is that why you didn't use that?
No, it was I don't know. I just did DF bean counter because that was my Twitter handle.
Okay, yeah. So
Probably should have used Bulletproof.
minor lapse in judgment here by DF bean counter, aka Drew, in the backslash of his Patreon. But you won't find much mental lapses when it comes to his fantasy football analysis. It is pretty spot on. I think, you know, you and I, for all of our disagreements and things we see differently from a player perspective, I think from a process perspective, we're pretty similar. And you know, let me know if I'm kind of off base here, but you know, people will say like, hey, Mike, are you an analytics guy? Are you a film guy? And my response is usually always like, I approach the game from a numbers perspective, but I'm not a true analytics person because I'm not someone that's actually deep in the stats and like digging all the stuff up. Like I'm not a Cooper at DFF. I'm not like someone that's doing clustering models for wide receivers. I'm not someone that's checking R-squared values and P values for statistical significance, right? So those are the true analytics people in my mind, right? When people say analytics from a fantasy perspective, to me, that's like almost like simple math. If you can do simple division, and you can use an Excel and be an Excel monkey, like you can do analytics. That's kind of like how I think about analytics. You know, like I approach it from there because I am an Excel monkey and I'm comfortable with that stuff. I'm sure you are as well. You know, working in the accounting field. But you know, I think when I think about you and I, like that's where I see our similarities. Is we have a very similar process where we take inputs from other really, really smart people, whether it's film or analytics, and then we kind of like aggregate all that. And you know, I think what my strength is, and I think what your strength is as well, is we're able to take all that data and just sift through all the bullshit and figure out what matters and doesn't matter, add context to stuff that needs context, and then like, you know, pull out insights from that, right? That's kind of how I approach the game. I don't know, like, is that kind of how you think about it too, or do you think about it a little bit differently?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. Like I don't know anything about analytics from like a, you know, regression model standpoint. Like I couldn't even tell you where to start, basically. I use stuff that other, like the smart people tell me matters. Like I didn't really realize it. I kind of do a clustering model, but I had no idea that's what it was called. Basically, I take the things that matter and then I compare them across the full sample, so everyone, and say, okay, well, these guys all check these same boxes, so they're all kind of in the same cluster.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was called the clustering model. Coop kind of clued me in on that.
Yeah, you do like a binning thing, right?
Yeah, it's binning basically, which again, I didn't know that was a thing either.
Yeah,
I was just, you know, learning from history basically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I think, you know, what's cool about your process is like you kind of like, you know, a lot of people I find like the really, really smart guys, the number one issue I see with them is they go on Twitter and they like dump a chart or like dump a bunch of numbers on the masses. And I guarantee you 90% of people scroll through that shit and never look at or think about it twice, right? Because it's too complicated. People just need decisions and guidance to be given to him. And I think that's kind of where you step in, right? Where you can take some of that information and you can look at it from like an accountant or like a numbers guy, and you're not going to get 100%, but you kind of get the gist of it. And then you take that and like tailor it into information that can actually be consumed by the masses. So that's kind of the beauty of what I think is like what I call the bulletproof process. Is it's really that it's not that you're getting 100% hit rates, even though people want you to and get mad about it when you don't have 100% hit rate on your bulletproof tier. But it's more so about like that bulletproof process is one that kind of really refines your skills and helps you identify those guys that hit best.
That's exactly right. Like I don't consider myself to be a smart analytics person. I just, like you said, I take what's out there and then I put it into a format that I think people can understand. That's one of the reasons I talk about hit rates so much is people understand hit rates. You don't have to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you show like some of the graphs that I see on Twitter, I have no idea what those graphs mean. I have to like study it to see if I can understand what they're trying to say. It's just like nobody, like you're reaching like 1% of the population of fantasy football players that will get this. You're just wasting time.
Much less than 1%. I mean, they're reaching like literally like you and me and like maybe a few other people, right? Like that. Those are not the masses. I mean, like I stop and read that stuff because I'm interested in the numbers. I'm interested in the graphs, and I know what like probably 80-90% of it means if I really reach down at my roots and just pull up those stats courses I took in college.
Yeah.
But like, you know, the regular person, like I said, the attention span of someone's like this, right? If you don't capture them within that first like couple sentences, like they're gone. They're not gonna dig into like these really ugly looking graphs or charts and stuff like that. So I totally agree with you there. But maybe let's get into the bulletproof process. So you call it the bulletproof grading system. Disclosure to all of my viewers before y'all get big mad. Bulletproof does not mean 100% hit rate, right? It's just a nice name that Drew came up with. You know, just like all these other guys out there that came up with different fancy names for their tiers. Drew came up with one and called it Bulletproof. You know, like Bulletproof, Transcendent, all these like good names. We'll kind of get into that. But, you know, don't get mad because it's not 100% hit rate because nobody has 100% hit rate. I can promise you that. If someone has 100% hit rate, they would not be playing fantasy football. I can promise you. So don't get big mad about that. It's just a name. It's not meant to be taken literally. But with that being said, Drew, maybe get into a little bit about the bulletproof grading system. Like, what is it? Like, where do you use it? How did it come to be? And then maybe we can get a little bit more into like how that evolved over time and where it's at today.
Sure. Yeah. So how it came to be was I started playing around with just different like metrics. Like College Dominator was like, you know, basically my intro to analytics. And like when I first found out about analytics, I was reading like a random Dynasty Nerds article that said that what was that? A Denver Broncos running back drafted in 2016. I can't remember his name now. He was really bad. He was a 4th round pick. And anyway, basically the conclusion of this article was that
the ball or something.
No, it was
CJ?
I can't remember. I'll look it up later. And anyway, the conclusion was that he was going to be really good because of all the other players that had the similar production. And I was like, oh, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Like that is absolutely usable. Like, how do you separate all these players that look good on film? Well, if they all produce the same, then they're on the same journey, right? So that's kind of like where I first like clued into it. I have no idea who wrote the article, but it was an interesting article. I remember it because it was like what kickstarted everything. And then, so how I started getting into it was, again, I got onto the Player Profiler website and started playing around with College Dominator and Breakout Age. And I was like enthralled with athleticism because I thought that's what mattered because it makes sense. Little did I know it had no bearing at all. I was like, oh, DeAndre Hopkins probably isn't very good because look at his athleticism. He's a mediocre athlete. Well, that would have been very poor advice. Thank God that I didn't give it to anyone. But it took a while before I realized that production was much more impactful. Anyway, so then I started playing around with these numbers and really didn't get anywhere. To be perfectly honest, it was just kind of, you know, eyeballing it. And then eventually 2019, I started like, I was going to put together these prospect threads because I was like, I'm going to get on Twitter and like do something kind of fun. Mm-hmm. So I started doing this Kyler Murray prospect thread. And it's like, yeah, he like did really well at this and he did really well at this and he did really well at this. And all these things seem to matter. And I got to the end And I was like, holy shit, like this guy's bulletproof. He ain't got no holes. There's no holes in this profile. That's how Bulletproof was born. And yeah, so then I did him and I got like 20 likes, I think. Wow, like 20 people like this. This is amazing. So I was like, well, I'm gonna do more. So then I did, I don't know, 7 or 8 or maybe even 9 prospect profiles that first year. And then in 2020, it was more of the same. Like I was basically just looking at things that I knew mattered, but it was eyeballing it. Like it wasn't like a defined process. Like this is this. It was just like, I like this guy because of all these reasons and he's bulletproof and that means nothing, but he's in my tier 1. And now like kind of so that was in May, like when I was doing like my prospect rankings.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until August when I was like, you know what? This is annoying. I'm going to actually define what it is. So then I got in Peter Howard's database and I started like plotting these things. I was like, okay, if somebody does this and this and this, that's really good. What are the other guys that did this and this and this? And then I just kept playing with it and playing with it and playing with it. Like for instance, my bulletproof tier, I was like 50 guys in here and 67% of them hit. That's pretty cool. And then I started looking at like the guys that missed and I was like, and versus the guys that hit. And I was like, oh, it's like all the 21-year-olds hit. Like every one of them hit.
Mm-hmm.
The 22-year-olds, they didn't hit. Like they hit at like 50%, not the 21-year-olds is like 80%. Like, well, holy smokes. Like I bet that probably matters. And I just kept building and then I kept going into different positions and defining. And I actually just updated my dynasty rankings today with a lot of the final like grade tweaks with finalizing the processes. I had the quarterbacks and the tight ends and the wide receivers done back in September, more or less. Like there's a couple little tweaks here and there. But the running backs, I really didn't have a like concrete process on it. It was, eyeballing it and kind of you know it when you see it. And I just finally kind of finished it. And I'm really excited about it because it seems to be really good.
Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into like each of the positions and kind of like what you look for. I think that'll be really interesting to the viewers. I mean, I think one thing that really caught my attention is you kind of got started like very similar to how I got started. You got plucked out of the Podfather, Matt Kelly. I kind of got plucked out by Garrett Price over at Dynasty Nerds, and neither of us did any sort of writing. And my first article, I mean, it was like almost like half comedy, like half analysis, I would say. But really where things start to take off for me, and it seems like for you as well, is when you started like doing like some threads on Twitter, right? And that's really what I did too. Is I was like, hey, like articles are cool and all, but like some of them are behind paywalls. Like people got to go on a website. Like this is this is the 21st century. Like people aren't necessarily looking to do that old school stuff anymore. So why not just put it into like a very easy to digest format on Twitter via a thread? Today it seems like there's so many people putting threads out there, right? What did you do to like kind of set yourself apart from the rest? Because it's almost like there's thread overload, and like as I'm scrolling through my Twitter, like I can't even like get to all the threads, and a lot of them like are just regurgitating data from someone else. So it's like it feels like a really tough space to even break into these days. But like, what were like some things that you think that you did that kind of helped you with that process?
Well, it's funny that you say that because I feel like even last year or 2 years ago, there weren't many people doing threads.
Yep.
And now it's like everyone's doing threads. It's a completely different game. What changed or what like set me apart was I think I was just doing really like unique stuff. And it wasn't always around like a lot of my threads are about process, right? They're not about players. I'm not like this player. It's more like, look, if you take all of the players that are like this, this is why it matters. Look at this and this and this and this. And okay, we'll control for, draft round. Okay, well now what happens? And I feel like it's a lot easier for people to like comprehend what's going on when you start breaking it down. Like each tweet in the thread is its own point. They're not like wordy threads. Like usually mine are like, age 18, round 1, hit rate. Like they're not complicated.
Yep.
What I think sets me apart though, like honestly, what I think sets a lot of people apart is marketing. Because, like we were talking about my bulletproof thing. Honestly, I think that gained me so much traction. Like you start seeing like bulletproof, and it just clicks like, oh, I read a bulletproof one before. I should read that one again.
Yeah.
Or like this year, I started doing this let's dive in thing. And it wasn't like I had planned it. It was just like, oh, like, writing the thread. I'm like, let's dive in. I was like, yeah,
Yep.
I'll do a funny diving gift. That'll be good. And then now I feel like people I like tweet like, let's dive in. And immediately people are like, ooh, like what's coming?
Yeah, I think it's definitely you got to lead the viewers to kind of see where you're going. So I definitely appreciate that part as well. One thing before we get into like the players and positional analysis, you know, obviously we kind of covered whether you're an analytics or film guy. I think we're kind of like a data aggregator. One thing that I've like really struggled with, like when we do get into like debates and stuff on Twitter, because I do like to engage with people there. It's really hard to change the minds of someone that's not really willing to be changed, right? Whereas like, I consider myself pretty stubborn, but if someone presents like actual like good data, I'm more than willing to change my mind, and that's kind of what I go to Twitter for someone to kind of show me the way. And if I'm doing something wrong, then I will by all means change that when presented with evidence. And I feel like you spend a lot of time trying to get into it and like educating people and like teaching people stuff on Twitter. And a lot of the times they don't care because they're just not willing to kind of take that insight in, whether they're like a hardcore film scout, like one of Fusu's children, as I refer to them as, or if they're just like steadfast in their ways. And one thing that I struggle with the most is like when people kind of just come by and they're like, "Oh, well, what your process missed Terry McLaurin, or your process missed DK Metcalf." It's like, yeah, but your process missed like Riley Ridley and Henry Ruggs and a plethora of other people. Like what? Or like, where's the conversation gonna go from here if we're gonna just anchor on one or two guys and try to focusing on that? Like, do you find you struggle with that? Like, I've seen you struggle with it, but I've seen you continually push and continually get back into the ring despite the lack of rational thought that in some of these discussions I've seen you've been in. So my question is two parts. One, like, why do you like pain? And two, how do you get yourself through it? And like, what is driving you to get to that end goal of trying to change their minds?
Great question. Back up for 1 second and talk about my personality.
Mm-hmm.
I did this personality test at my former employer.
Uh-huh.
We all had to do it after we got our CPA.
Okay.
And it was this personality test. It was like Myers-Briggs, but it was something else. I can't
Yeah.
remember. And it was like eye-opening for me. Like I had no idea exactly what I was like until this thing told me what I was like. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh my God, that's me. And one of the things that it talked about was that, like you had just said, I'm very quick to change my mind if somebody shows me a better way.
Yeah.
Like last year, I think it was you actually that were telling me that you should check out this yards per team pass attempt.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good. I was like, okay, I'll check it out. Sure, why not? And then I checked it out and I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. I like it. I'm in. Whereas I think a lot of other people would be like, yeah, no, I do it this way and I've always done it this way and that's the way I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm very quick to adapt when somebody shows me a better way. And in the personality test, it literally said that. Like,
Yeah.
you will argue to the death
Yeah.
until somebody shows you a better way. And then as soon as they show you a better way, you're out. You're
Yeah.
like completely flipped.
Yeah.
And that's just who I am. And it's who I've always been.
Yeah.
Like, I am stubborn right up until I know that I'm wrong. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done. Let's go. What's the new way? So on Twitter, though, it's I don't argue with people because I'm stubborn. I argue with people not even to convince them.
Mm-hmm.
Argue with people because it hits everyone's timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And if it hits somebody's timeline that didn't know that and is willing to listen to it,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it changes their opinion of it.
Mm-hmm.
And now they want to do it, or they want to know more, or like basically a Twitter engagement isn't me convincing the person I'm arguing with. It's me telling the world, hey, look, this is how I do it. This person is obviously in a disagreement with the way that I do it, and that's fine, but I'm just going to let you know anyway.
Yeah.
And
I really like that. I've never thought about it like that. I'm someone that just argues just to argue, to be quite honest with you. It gives me the thrill sometimes. But once in a while, people will DM me and say like, "Hey, holy shit! Like, you've changed the way that I think about the game." And I think that is really important because at the end of the day, those of us, I hate using the word analyst. I hate considering myself an analyst because one, I don't do this full time. It's just a freaking hobby. But two, I feel like I'm just another guy that just plays the game. But for those out there that do claim to be analysts and do put that in their profile and do kind of stand on that name, I think it is their responsibility. It's our responsibility to do our best to make people better fantasy gamers, right? We talked about this in DMs, and you said a line that just nailed it for me. And I say it all the time. I care about being right, as in like giving out the right information. So if I'm wrong, I will be very quick to tell people that I'm wrong, because I would have changed my way because I want to be right. That is my ultimate goal. I want to be right. I want to be a better fantasy gamer, because that leads to winning championships, and that leads to money, which is, one of the main reasons why I do this. I compete because I want to win, right? So I don't feel like that is what most people's, I don't want to say most, but I don't feel like that's what a lot of people's motivations are, right? You see some of the stuff out there, and it's almost like it's like trying to like one outdo each other. I don't know if you've ever seen that Michael Jordan like Nike commercial where they're like, anything you can do,
Oh
I
yeah.
can do better. I feel like it's like that on Twitter, like all the time, where it's like, oh, you have Travis Etienne at RB3. Well, I have him at RB4. And then someone's like, oh, I actually have him at like RB10. He sucks. Right. So
Yeah.
you get into this like battle of trying to one up each other, of trying to be contrarian. And I tweeted it out as a joke like a couple weeks back. And I was saying, like, dude, the new contrarian is to just be normal and not try and be contrarian, because there's too many people trying to be contrarian, doing wild shit and saying wild stuff just to get engagement and get clicks. And I get it. That's what you guys want to do. That's what you want to sell. I totally understand. But that's not what I'm here for. That's not like, the viewers that have tagged along with me know that, like, when I make a big bet, it's because I'm actually doing it. I'm making those trades. It's not because I want clicks. It's not because I want my teams to be good, right? So, you said something like I said that really hit home, close to home to me, was, I want to be right, and everything that I do is in the pursuit of trying to become better and be right. And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of like respect that goes towards that, and you might not get all the clicks, and you and I might never get all the followers, but I think that's okay, because first of all, I've never done it for the followers. I've just kind of done it my way, and luckily enough, people have tuned in to kind of like follow along, and same for you. So it's really kind of, it's refreshing, I think, to kind of get that perspective. And I just wanted to kind of share that with the viewers, because not everyone can see our DMs. Hopefully they're not spying on us. If they are, they're getting all our secrets. But it's just an interesting perspective to have in this day and age of the clickbait season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the direct quote was, "I'd rather be right than popular."
Yeah. Yeah,
And
exactly.
I agree with you. I feel like a lot of people just put stuff out to get the clicks. And I mean, a lot of the stuff that I do put out is controversial.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not tweeting like, "Oh, hey, you know what? I like the same player as everyone else." Like,
Yeah.
that's never going to be a tweet that I'm going to send, because it's a given. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, I think that Patrick Mahomes is really good. I
Yeah.
don't need to tell you that he's really good.
Yeah.
But if I tweet something, it's probably because, hey, like, this doesn't seem to add up to me. Like, I tweeted last night something about DK Metcalf and how I don't have him in the range of wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty, because Seattle was 20th in pass attempts last
Mm-hmm.
year when they let Russ cook for half the year. And now they're not going to let him cook. And that pass attempt number is going to go really, really low, which means DK can't be number 1.
Yeah.
And like, that's not popular.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have DK at number 1 either. So I kind of agree with you there, for a couple of reasons, many reasons, but we can get into that a little bit later. But I agree with you. Like, I want to be contrarian in the pursuit of being correct and being
Yeah.
right. If being contrarian means I'm right, great. But if being right means I'm the same as everyone else, fantastic. I'm not going to rank a guy lower just because I want to have some more stuff to talk about. But I think that really just goes to I don't really tweet out hot takes that much, right? They're not hot takes for me. If I tweet out something, I'm literally I'm doing that thing, or I really believe in it, and someone else might believe it's a hot take, right? Like, I don't have DeVonta Smith in my top 3 wide receivers. That's not a hot take. It's just how I'm approaching the game.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But it's interesting. We both kind of have that similar process, and I think that's why we have a lot of overlap. I would say in our followers too. So, but speaking of popular, I want to get your thoughts on BMI. I mean, BMI is a pretty controversial topic. Some people swear by it. Fusu, Dalton. I know at one point you did, and then others like completely ignore it and write it off. Like, what is your take on BMI? Like, first of all, for viewers that don't know, what BMI stands for body mass index, and it's basically a formula that in layman's terms, calculates how thick you are, right? Like if you're tall and you weigh a lot, that's great, alpha receiver. If you're short and you weigh a lot, that'll increase your BMI. But if you're tall and lanky, your BMI is lower. So, what is your take on BMI? How do you use it in your process, if at all? And what is your thought on it today?
Yeah, BMI is something that is not like an input in my process per se.
Mm-hmm.
Like BMI won't change a player's grade is maybe the way to put it. Like if a player grades out as bulletproof, I don't care what their BMI is. They're bulletproof.
Mm-hmm.
If a player grades out as coin flip, they're coin flip. It doesn't change no matter what their BMI is. But I take BMI into consideration when I'm doing like how I rank those grades, for example. BMI doesn't really, it does affect hit. Well, it correlates with hit rate to some extent, but it's not like a hit rate being top 24. It's not a huge difference though. It's more of a difference when you're looking at wide receiver 1 seasons. When you're looking for like that alpha wide receiver, that's why I like alpha wide receivers. They get a lot of targets. High BMI guys are usually alpha targets or alpha wide receivers. So that's why I'm chasing that BMI bucket. That being said, even if you like split it in half, like if you just take the whole population, take the mean and then split it above and below, the higher BMI guys hit at a higher rate than the lower BMI guys.
Yeah.
So even though the low BMI guys, like most people use like 26 as the threshold, 26.0 BMI as a threshold. When you look below that, there aren't that many players below it. And that's kind of the argument against using it as well. There's just not very many of them. It's like, okay, fair. But they do hit at a lower rate that are below it. And then when you just expand it, so you have exactly the same population above and below, the higher BMI guys still hit at a way higher rate. And they hit wide receiver 1 seasons at a way higher rate as well. I use BMI as context more than anything else, I guess is the way to put it. It speaks more to role than it does player quality.
Yeah. What do you say to people that say, look, like BMI is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy because NFL likes big players, so they're going to draft more of them earlier, therefore speaks to more opportunity. Therefore they're going to feed them more, similar to like bigger running backs. Like, do you see that at all in any of your analysis, or do you think that's kind of bogus?
Well, I think that like you asked me earlier about, or have we talked about it yet? Kind of my learning process on how to do this. And one of the things that I was focusing on incorrectly was looking at only the numerators. Like how many guys hit that were, 27 BMI, and it's way more than 25 BMI, and it's way more than 26 BMI. But you have to consider the denominator, which I wasn't originally. And I started doing that about, I don't know, a year or two ago, probably 2 years ago. Started looking at denominators as well, because yes, there are way more players that hit that are in that prime, like 27 BMI range, because there are way more that are drafted.
Yeah.
But once you factor in the denominator as well, we're looking at hit rates then, and the rate at which they hit is still higher on the bigger guys.
Yeah.
Is it a self-fulfilling prophecy? Probably to some extent. Most coaches put the big thick guy in the X receiver spot. I mean, I'm just trying to get the most fantasy points. So if it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't really care how it gets there, as long as it gets me there, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think the biggest knock on BMI is in that lower bucket. Like the denominator is pretty low when you start accounting for draft capital. So like 1 or 2 guys is going to kind of influence that hit rate a bit. So that's the biggest knock I've seen against it. I'm similar to you. Like I'm never going to cancel a guy out because he's low BMI. I use it contextually as well, like because maybe it speaks to the upside of that wide receiver. They're more likely to become like that alpha and become that high target hog. That's how I consider it as well. We talked about hit rates a lot, right? And something that I've really tried to like consider, and at least as a part of my process, is I think like we need to think about players from an expected value perspective, right? And I think expected value to me is like hit rate times impact of hit. Because
for sure.
If you look at like hitting as a top 24 wide receiver, like it's nice, right? It sounds good, but it doesn't really get you that many W's. So, I really try on, especially on contending teams, I try and like balance that a little bit where like, yes, we can quantify the hit rate really well. And yes, it's kind of hard to quantify the impact, but just like across positions, like just rationally thinking about it, we know that hitting on a running back is far more important than hitting on like a top 24 wide receiver, right? Just in point differentials alone, right? that's I don't think that's arguable by anyone. I don't care what zero RB people say. I don't think that's actually arguable.
It's not.
But that's not something that people talk about, right? And I think it's great because we've moved from not talking about anything to like talking about hit rates because of folks like you and because of guys like Peter Howdy that have educated the public and really like anchored to that. I think the next frontier, to borrow a little bit from the Star Trek nerds, is to move into how do we think about the impact? Do you think about that in your process as well when you're thinking about trades or when you're thinking about draft, or is that kind of like, I can't quantify that, so I don't want to really think about it too much?
No, for sure. So the 2018 class is kind of the first time that I really started delving into it. And it really came down to what I kind of decided was that I would put coin flip, like mediocre, like good-ish prospect running backs over bulletproof, like wide receiver 2 type
Okay.
wide receivers.
Yeah.
If that makes sense in like my combined rankings.
Yeah.
Because like you said, like if a running back hits, if they're actually good, like coin flip means 50-50, right? Like some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be terrible.
Yeah.
So if I get the good one, it matters way more than getting like probably 2 or 3 of the wide receiver 2 type wide receivers.
Yeah.
The issue I'm having is I have a really hard time picking out the guys that are going to be repeated wide receiver ones. Because there's so few of them as well. Like it's very, very hard to say, well, this guy's going to be a perennial wide receiver 1. It's really easy, in my opinion, to say, well, this guy's going to be a perennial wide receiver 2. Like those guys, I feel like it's kind of a solved equation at this point.
Yeah.
But to get the wide receiver 1 profile, I have a lot more difficulty with it. And it's led me down some paths that are probably not exactly what a lot of other data analysts would go with.
Yeah.
One of them is like looking at relative athletic score. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's kind of where my upper tier is born, like my generational and transcendent tier. Those guys are like the guys that check all the boxes. Like they have high floors because they produced or they're, top 5 NFL picks or whatever the case is. But then once you filter those bulletproof players with RAS score, you look at elite RAS, then you get like Julio Jones and DJ Moore and Des Bryant and Justin Jefferson, which I wish I would have known this last year.
For the viewers out there, what is RAS? And
relative athletic score. It's
where
by
do they get that?
Math Bomb, I think is his name on Twitter. He's got a whole website for it. It's pretty cool. It combines all the combine metrics into like one number so that you don't have to like, you don't overweight any particular metrics.
What's his tag?
I think it's Math Bomb.
Basically, it's to just say how much of a freak athlete someone is, right?
Exactly. And I believe he size adjusted as well. So like AJ Green comes out as like a top tier athlete, even though his like, his 40-yard dash wasn't incredible. It was like 4.5 or 4.55. Like it wasn't like he was Julio Jones at 4.39 or whatever he ran, or 4.40. I can't remember. But anyway, once I take the bulletproof players and I filter over this RAS score, it's like my wide receiver 1 hit rate goes from like, I don't know, 50% to like 100%. Like it's that insane. And so that's kind of the pursuit that I'm on right now. But it's not like as you know, athleticism at wide receiver doesn't matter. Like if you look at it over the whole sample of the population, it doesn't matter. Like it does not make one player better than the other. And even when I get into the lower tiers, it doesn't matter. Like I know a lot of people are going to say, well, DK Metcalf and Chase Claypool. I'm like, okay, but for every one of those guys, there's still a Miles Boykin and there's a, they're still only hitting at the same rate that they always were. Like it doesn't improve the hit rate at all. It's only when you get into these top tier players and then you look at the athleticism on the top tier players where it's like, whoa. And it's a small sample. It's, pops out like 7 or 8 guys, I think, maybe not even that many. And maybe it's just random. Who knows?
Yeah.
But,
I mean,
kind of an interesting thing.
Like, look, people say like people love to jump and say like athleticism doesn't matter. And, I know we say that as a catchphrase, but like, logically, obviously it does matter. Like a better athlete makes you a better football player, but it just so happens that those who aren't athletic, maybe they do other things better. So it's never really comparable 1-to-1, right? I mean, you give DK Metcalf Keenan Allen's route running ability, I guarantee you it'll matter. You give
Yeah.
Chase Claypool, Devontae Adams released off the line of scrimmage, I guarantee you it'll matter, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
that it matters a lot less. Similar to with running backs, it matters a lot less than all the other positions. It's not that it doesn't matter, but I can believe and I can buy a case where it matters at the really, really high ends, where if you're a really bad athlete, you're not going to make it. And if you're just like a really big freak like a DK Metcalf, like, yeah, maybe it does matter and helps you on the NFL field. So I do think there's something to that. And like you said, it's small sample and whatever, but look, this is what we have to work with, and we can only draw with the information that we have, right? All right. So I want to move on a little bit here into some player talk. Let's go position by position, because I know that you kind of look at a few different factors, and we're going to talk about rookies here, because that's kind of all the hype. We're about dynasty here, and we got some rookie drafts coming up. I know I'm in a couple of rookie drafts with Drew, so I'm trying to get the inside lane here so I can snipe him.
You don't have any picks. I got them all.
Yeah, exactly. But I got the ring, so that's what matters.
That's true.
So top 5 quarterbacks. But before we get into your ranks here, maybe share with the viewers, like, what are the top factors that you look at when you're considering your bulletproof process grading for quarterbacks?
Okay, so bulletproof process on quarterbacks. I steal. Have you ever heard of QBase model from Football Outsiders?
I have heard of it from you, but share with
Perfect.
the viewers what that is.
So Football Outsiders has this quarterback model that's incredible. Like, I've never seen anything as good as it. I've heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but the guy who created it, I believe, was hired by the Browns and was instrumental in them drafting Baker Mayfield, who was phenomenal in QBase. I believe he was 3rd all time, which goes back to 2003, 2001, somewhere in there. Like, Carson Palmer's in it, so it's pretty old. Anyway, I use that as like the base, and then I do make some tweaks to it. Like, I noticed that the 23-year-olds, doesn't matter what their QBase is, they still suck. So I'm not that into 23-year-olds. Maybe it's overfitting. I don't know. It doesn't, like, it's like, I was talking to someone about this in my DMs one time. It was actually about BMI. It was like, okay, well, you're overfitting though, because, we know that BMI is better. So the fact that higher BMI players hit more frequently doesn't matter, because we expect the lower BMI players to hit at a lower rate. I'm like, well, but that's what I'm trying to do, is get the better players.
Yeah.
So it's like with QBase, it's like, I don't want the 23-year-olds. Maybe it's overfitting. I don't know. But if a guy goes 1st overall in 23, they still hit. So like Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield and Eli Manning, and I think Carson Palmer, and I think there was another guy that was 23 went 1st overall that had good QBase, they still hit. So I'm like, if they're 1st overall, they're the best quarterback in the class. It's still, it probably doesn't really matter. But if you get into these guys like,
let's hold on. Let's go into that point real quick. And, it's kind of like a similar trend we see elsewhere. But when people say overfitting, I'm assuming they're speaking about like draft capital, right? So like, their QBase is good, or maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't matter. But the fact that they got drafted 1st overall probably is like is a stronger indicator, right?
Yeah, that's more or less what it comes down to. Basically, they're just saying, you're just fitting to the population that has already hit. Like, you're taking hindsight into account by saying, I don't want the 23-year-olds. Like, yeah, but this is what has happened. So I don't want the 23-year-olds. If a bunch of 23-year-olds start hitting, I'll start taking 23-year-olds again.
Yep.
I'm not above that. It's a small sample. It's always going to be a small sample of football. There's only, 50 quarterbacks taken in the last 20 years in the 1st round. Like, we don't have big samples.
Okay. So you start with QBase, you kind of tweak it up and down. Are there any other big factors you look at, or is it just really QBase and draft capital that does the talking?
No, QBase, draft capital, age, breakout age is something I kind of look at. More in terms of like starting experience, which is probably already taken into account based on QBase, because that is an input for them.
Yep.
I look at, efficiency, like QBR. I still like the players to have high QBRs, or at least moderate QBRs, which again, they don't use QBR. They use yards per attempt.
Yep.
No, adjusted yards per attempt, and completion percentage, I think.
Yep.
Which I think makes sense, but I just like to see it anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
So
working on age-adjusted QBR as well, which I have not completed yet, but it's something that I think is going to be kind of cool. I have age-adjusted PFF grades, which seem to be pretty promising.
uh-huh.
So that's input. Probably won't impact my grade, but it'll make more of an impact on how I rank the players within the grade.
So PFF grades, I mean, you and I know it doesn't really matter when it comes to wide receivers and running backs. I can understand why it kind of matters for quarterbacks. I mean, they were like very vocal about Baker Mayfield as well in that class as being the top quarterback. And when they came out with that, that was very controversial. My hypothesis, let me know if you agree, is I think that people overweight the competition component for quarterbacks, right? Because I understand how it works for wide receivers. If you're a wide receiver, you never face a top cornerback, you can look pretty damn good when you're not that good, right? But
Yeah.
for a quarterback, you're controlling the entire offense. And yeah, the competition you're playing might suck, but your team also stinks, right? Like look at Zach
Mm-hmm.
Wilson. His team's not good. And I don't care what people are pulling stats about his wide receivers. They are not NFL caliber wide receivers. And, when he goes and people, knock him about playing top competition and getting stomped, like, yeah, he's getting stomped. His O-line sucks. His receivers suck. Everybody on his team sucks. So what do you expect? They're completely outmatched, right? Whereas
Yeah.
if you look at someone like in Alabama, yeah, they're playing against the best teams in the SEC, but they're like basically an NFL caliber team, and their gap between their talent and another NFL and another college team's talent might as well be like a JUCO. They're playing like like Mississippi State and like Alabama West and all these schools. Like, dude, these are not like the gap in competition between them and like another team in the SEC, another bum team in the SEC versus like a Zach Wilson and another bum team that's not in a Power 5 conference isn't that big, right? So I can see the merit in using a PFF quarterback grade. Now, you know what I feel about the other grades, but I can see why that matters, and I can see why age-adjusted stuff matters. Do you agree with that assessment, or do you think there's another reason for it?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Every time that something gets posted about like Javonte Williams being the best running back per PFF of all time or whatever they've been posting, I like immediately go to the patrons and I'm like, hey, listen, don't listen to this.
Yeah.
Javonte Williams is good, but
Yeah.
this isn't why.
Yeah.
Like you're allowed to like Javonte Williams, but don't let this be the reason.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way, and people call it a crusade against PFF. It's not a crusade against PFF. It's just it's a pursuit of like truth and accurate data. So I want
Yeah.
people using good shit. I want people using the right data, and PFF, for all their faults, they're a great database, right? You can go to them for forced tackles, missed targets, all that stuff, but their grades are just they're not good because at the wide receiver running back position, they do not account for competition. And I've said this, like Sam at PFF, like I think he got like pissed off when I first posted that PFF thread about their grades not
I
mattering.
imagine he did.
And we had some back and forth, and what we arrived at was like, hey, like those grades are not meant to be used for fantasy purposes. So even though they say that's not how they market it, we all know damn well that's how
That's
they market
exactly
it for
how they
clicks.
market it.
So it's up to us and hopefully people that follow us to like really understand why it does not matter and why you shouldn't be using it. And like I like Javonte Williams. So when I tweeted that, it wasn't about, hey, Javonte Williams sucks. It's like, hey, you can like Javonte Williams, but there are way better reasons to like him than to fall in this grade. And don't cheapen your analysis. Don't cheapen your opinion just by you going for the headline grading, because it really doesn't matter. But anyways, enough about PFF. This is not a PFF episode. I want to dive into this class for you. Top of the class is Lawrence, Fields, Wilson, and Lance, and then Mac Jones as well for some of the Mac Jones truth that's out there. I imagine you have Lawrence first, so I'm not gonna I don't want to talk about that too much because it's really obvious where he should be. I think the more interesting discussion for me, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, is Fields versus Wilson versus Lance. I want to get your views. I know you've been flip-flopping. I know you love Zach Wilson. I know I had to like sell you on Justin Fields a little bit. Where are you now on that tier of quarterbacks, and how do you have them ranked?
Okay, so Lawrence is number one. Then I have Justin Fields, and part of it is because of what you had said with like Konami code quarterbacks. Like Justin Fields is a Konami code quarterback. The reason that I actually really liked Justin Fields last year, and I haven't looked it up this year, but his average depth of target was absurd last year.
Mm-hmm.
It was like way higher than everyone else in college football. And I'm like, if you can give me a mobile guy that throws the ball down the field, like that's what fantasy dreams are made of.
Yeah.
So if I think Zach Wilson is maybe a better NFL quarterback, it doesn't matter because Justin Fields has break fantasy potential, and that matters a hell of a lot to me.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing that kind of like separated the two for me was just what I was talking about with PFF grades. Like we have only ever seen Justin Fields be incredible for the age that he was.
Yeah.
We haven't seen him be anything less than a top tier quarterback in college.
Yeah. Except when he was in Georgia and Kirby Smart, aka Kirby Dumb, decided to play Jake Fromm over him. I will never get over that at all.
Fair, but here's the thing. In the limited sample that he had, I think he had 30 pass attempts or something. He still graded really well per PFF.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, yeah, okay, he had a small sample, but at least it was a good sample.
Yeah.
When you flip it to Zach Wilson, we have 2 seasons of mediocrity, like 2 seasons of like, who is this guy? And then 1 season of Justin Fields level production. Like, why would I bet on the guy that has 1 season of this when I can bet on the guy that has multiple seasons of this?
Okay, to play devil's advocate here, because I had this debate many times last year as well between Burrow and Tua. That would have led us to Tua over Burrow, right? So, this kind of ties with my next question. I know you're still a big Tua believer. So, 1, where do you have Tua going? And 2, like, what do you say to the haters that say, well, if you're trying to count for multiple years and you would have picked Tua, and therefore, we all know Burrow was better. What is your response to something like that?
Okay, well, first of all, I still liked Tua better right up until draft day. Tua was still my quarterback 1 because he had done it longer. I had more confidence that he was a good quarterback than a shooting star like Joe Burrow. Not to say Joe Burrow was bad. He didn't do it long enough. So when I'm comparing the two, I'm like, yeah, I prefer Tua. Then what happened was Burrow got drafted by the Bengals as expected. I really liked what the Bengals had to begin with in Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd. The Bengals then took T. Higgins at the top of the 2nd round, and I was like, this guy's a god.
Yeah.
This is the best situation you could imagine. I will take Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
Miami Dolphins looked at what they had, and they said, we're not going to get him any weapons.
Yeah.
He was sink or swim with nothing.
Yeah.
I don't like Devontae Parker. I don't like Mike Gesicki. I don't like anyone on that team other than Tua.
Yeah.
So after draft day, it was like, well, this is easy. Like, give me Joe Burrow. I don't care if he is more risky. He has the better supporting cast. And like T. Higgins is coming in as a rookie, 21-year-old rookie with Joe Burrow. They're going to make magic for like a decade. This is what I want.
Yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you on that one. I was totally the same way. I had Tua ahead of Burrow for much of the same reasons, and I'm not a quarterback whisperer by any means. But I listened to some podcasts about where Tua had to work out with the great T.O., one of the greatest wide receivers to ever do it, and he was saying like, dude, this kid can throw any route open, and I thought that was a really cool piece of insight that we normally wouldn't get. But yeah, like you said, I was a huge T. Higgins truther. Through all the hate, through all the, oh my God, he didn't run a 40, through, oh my God, he ran a slow 40 at his pro day. I didn't care about any of it. I was stronghold, steadfast in my T. Higgins trutherism, despite all the barrage of disrespect I got from my co-hosts. And obviously that proved out to be true so far. But I'm with you, man. The situation matters so much. We saw it with Josh Allen, how the Buffalo Bills were able to build around him. And, I won't say the Bengals have built around Joe Burrow yet because the O-line still stinks. But definitely, kind of built it the right way. And I actually really, really like what Miami did with the team, but I would agree with you. They did not do enough in terms of getting him weapons. So I'm hoping they address that this season, or they get Deshaun Watson, one of the two, to kind of boost that team up. But yeah, so it sounds like you're still high on Tua. That's good. I mean, I haven't given up on him either. Where would Tua slot in right now in your ranks between Lawrence, Fields, Wilson, and Lance if he's there?
I have him at 5 right now. Like, I have him behind all 4 of those guys right now. I still believe in Tua. Like, I still think he's going to be a good quarterback, good NFL quarterback.
Yep.
But I don't have faith that the Miami Dolphins are going to get the right players. Like, I've been seeing a ton of mocks with DeVonta Smith going to the Dolphins, and I'm just like, that's not.
Yeah.
Like,
that's not the way.
That's suboptimal.
That's not the way. What if let's say they draft a Jamar Chase and they sign a Will Fuller? What would you do?
Fire up Tua, man.
Yeah.
Fire him up. He'll jump up to probably right behind Justin Fields.
That would be beautiful. I would love to see that as well. And what people don't know is like Tua actually offers a decent amount of production on the ground. He didn't do it that much in college, but in the NFL, like whatever reason. Maybe it's because he doesn't have enough weapons or whatever, but he's been doing it. So look, guys, don't give up on Tua yet. I think it's too early. We don't know what the impact of the hip injury was on him. That was a potentially season career-ending injury, and he came back much faster than I expected. I didn't think he was going to play at all this season. So the whole pulling and sitting and stuff like that, we don't know what's going on there. Let's give him another year, see what he does. He's got the draft capital. He definitely has the IQ. I've been following Tua since he graduated from high school and won the Elite 11 quarterback competition. So yeah, don't give up on him. Love Fields. You and I are locked in on that. I think he is the clear quarterback 2, in my opinion, in this class. You know, I know some people love to hate on his processing ability, but here's the thing. Like I've seen some film people hate on it, and I've seen other film people I respect love it. Like Thor came out and put out a really cool thread about how he processes, and it's like it's more of like a Deshaun Watson syndrome where he thinks he can do too much, and I want that, man. I want winners. I'll never understand people like bypassing that critical aspect of play. Like I want guys who think they can win and proven they can win. And Deshaun Watson is that. Justin Fields is that. Terran Lawrence is that. Zach Wilson, not that. I still like him, but he's not that, right? So given that edge, I'm a big fan. You know, let's just really quickly cover off Trey Lance. And I'm a big fan of Trey Lance because he's so raw. I understand that, but his upside as a running quarterback, and from all the film people that I've seen in terms of his arm talent as well, seems to be a big plus. Like, what is your thought on Trey Lance? Like, is he in a tier below Fields and Wilson? Is he in the same tier but just behind him? Like, how do you think about Trey Lance in this class?
I suspect he's going to grade out lower than the other three,
Mm-hmm.
but it's probably going to be because he only played 1 year,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. Like I think if he had played this year, I don't think he necessarily would have graded out lower.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me, like this COVID year, when this first all happened with all these opt-outs and, you know, is there going to be a college season and so on and so forth back in the summer last year, it doesn't matter. We already know everything we need to know about these 2020 guys. It's going to matter for 2020 or sorry, for these 2021 guys. It's going to matter for 2022 and 2023. And those guys where it's like, we don't know what they would have done when they were younger because everything was all messed up. Really appreciate how much there was still to uncover on a few of these players, like Trey Lance, for instance. I don't know, like his one season of play was like top tier, like incredible.
Yeah.
But it was one season and it was against low competition, and it's just unnerving, I guess, to say the least. It's like, I don't know what the floor is. It could be nothing.
Yeah.
But the ceiling is like through the roof. He could be the best quarterback in the class.
Yeah, that's exactly how I described it.
It's like, I don't know. He could be Lamar Jackson that can throw. Maybe not quite Lamar Jackson on the ground, but like he could be Josh Allen that could throw from day one. You know, like he could be that. But I just don't have the confidence to say that he is.
Yeah.
Because he could be nothing. Like he could be absolutely nothing.
I think Trey Lance is like kind of, I don't think he's going to be nothing, but I think he could be like the quarterback version of Cam Akers from last year. Like I was a big fan of Cam Akers, big truther, but I thought that out of all the prospects, he was a little bit riskier just because of how late he picked up the game as a running back, but his ceiling was like through the roof and higher than all of the other ones. So I kind of see Trey Lance in that same respect. So good to see that we're kind of on the same page there. Now let's dive into running backs real quick. You know, I don't want to spend too much time on this because based on my work so far, this class stinks. I mean, there's no other great way to put it. You know, Najee Harris is good, but he wouldn't crack my top 3 from last season. You know, Javonte Williams is cool. He wouldn't crack like my top 5 from last season probably. And Travis Etienne, like same type of thing. But, you know, you mentioned you're working on your running backs right now. You've refined the process a little bit. Same question back to you. What are like the top factors that you're looking for at running backs? I actually think running back is a little bit trickier than wide receivers.
Yeah, running back is a lot different than wide receivers because we're not like wide receivers. We're looking at like market share stats, which is pretty straightforward. It's, you know, there's nothing complicated about it. Running backs, I don't think market share is the best way to be grading running backs. Like I haven't really had that much success in looking at any kind of like raw or like manipulated metrics on that sense.
Yeah.
It's funny to say from a data perspective, but like, give me the film on this one.
Yeah.
I use Lance Zierlein. grading process. They're a pretty big part of my system. Graham Barfield's yards created.
The GOAT. He's coming on the show in April. He's truly the GOAT when it comes to running backs. I use him as well.
Man, I was like fanboying. I was like, when I started, I can't remember how it came up. Somebody asked me if I would do an AMA in their Discord, and I was like, oh, that's a cool idea. And I was like, I should do that in my Discord, like invite people in to do an AMA. Yeah. So I like invited like, you and Fusu and like Ray and like some people that I already know. And I was like, I'm going to invite Graham Barfield. Yeah. I'm going to invite him. So I like, hey, Graham, like I got this little AMA thing. If you want to come in, there's only like, 250, 300 patrons, but we'd love to have you if you got an hour to spare. He's like, yeah, sure, man. I'm like, oh my God, Graham Barfield's coming. This is amazing. Yeah. It was the same reaction when you said yes, just, know. But
he was yeah, sure, buddy. He's a super nice guy, man. Just seems like a really cool guy that you can kind of grab a beer with. I'm excited to talk to him and just like speak, not face to face, but through Zoom or whatever. Yeah. Thing, but yeah, he's just these guys, Graham Barfield, JJ Zach Ryerson, I have him coming on as well later on the season. They're just like being generous with their time. It's really cool to see some of the big names to give small guys like us the time of mind. So yeah, I'm actually sad I haven't missed it. It's coming, right?
Coming, yeah. It's coming.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna.
He's coming out. I think it's in April.
Okay, cool. So you got yards created by the GOAT, film grading by another GOAT and Lance Zierlein over at NFL.com. Is there anything else you look at, like from like even just to get context from the number side? Do you look at like yards per team attempt? Do you look at stuff like that, or what do you do?
Yeah, I got yards per team attempt. I use best and average. And then what else do I got here? Receiving yards per like market share receiving yards. I still use that because I think it's valuable information.
Let's talk about that actually. I not only do I look at that, I also look at like their volume of targets to see that, the reason why I look at it is not just because I think targets equals elite receiver or anything like that. So that, Travis Etienne has a ton of catches, but by no means, I don't think he's a better receiver than Javonte or Najee Harris. But what it does show is like maybe some indication from an NFL team, like, hey, look, this guy caught a lot of balls, right? And what people always say, like, just because he didn't do it doesn't mean he can't. And I understand there's some truth to that, but there's also some biases when you get to the NFL. Like, hey, if this guy didn't do it in the college, why would I trust him to do it now? So I agree with you there. Like, so you look at market share of receiving. Do you also look at like any efficiency metrics when it comes to receiving to see if they're a good receiver?
I haven't really yet. It's something I might look into later once I have a little bit more time. Mm-hmm. Like something like can you even get like a yards per route run?
Yeah, so you can. I think sports info solutions. It costs a bunch of money to get it though.
Yeah, I buy a month every year.
Yeah. So I think
to pull all the rookie
stuff. Yeah, exactly. I think they have it. They have like also the forced tackles miss and all that stuff, and then I think PFF has it, don't they?
I don't know if they have it or not. I'll have to check.
I think they have routes run. At one point they did, and maybe they removed it from the draft guide. But yeah, if not, like honestly, I've just looked at like even just raw target numbers. Like what is their yards per target? It's not great, and it's not perfect by any means, but it gives you some sense. Like if I saw like last year, for example, LaMichael Pirine, he had like a bunch of targets, but he's averaging like 5 yards per reception. Like no thanks. Like,
yeah, that wouldn't be very interesting.
So it's all contextual. Sounds like similar to you, like similar to me. I do really rely on film. I think the nuances of the running back position is super interesting, and we haven't, as an analytics community, found a great way to capture that and contextualize that in data yet. That's why we need to rely on guys. And the closest person that's ever done that is Graham Barfield, and he does it from a film perspective. Like if you guys look at yards created, he's literally spending the time and going in and watching and charting all this stuff. So it's a ton of work. I understand why it takes a lot of time, but I'm with you on that one. So let's get into it.
I've got a couple more for you. Hold on.
What?
I also use draft age, early declare.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Missed tackles forced from Graham. Raz, I use relative athletic score on running backs as well. I actually use a little lower threshold. Mm-hmm. With wide receiver, they use like a really high threshold. And with running backs, it's not as high, but it's still the upper tier. Really low filters for like college dominator and target share, like 5% target share. Yeah. Anything under that, it's like it gets really sketchy, like Ronald Jones and Derrick Henry from a receiving upside standpoint.
Yeah. I heard you.
And then breakout age. I use breakout age on running back.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
we
think a
had
lot of
some.
people do.
Yeah, we had some discussion on that. I think some people use it, some people don't. I think personally, I don't rely on it too heavily just because I think draft capital kind of for running backs especially overrides a lot of that because like at the end of the day, it's just volume. And if someone gets drafted in the first round, I understand this is maybe a lower hit rate for sure from like the total populace. But there's some small sample concern for me. And at the end of the day, like I mean, Trent Richardson was was an RB1 in his rookie year. He didn't do much after that, but I think, volume is king, and especially for the running back position. So if someone's a bit older, they break out a little later, but they get like first round draft capital, I think that's really going to override things for me, which segues really well into our next little segment here. Why are you an RB ageist, and why do you hate Najee Harris?
Okay, so when I was on my rampage of hating Najee Harris, that was when he was supposed to be a second round pick. I need to get that out there. He was supposed to be a second round pick at that point. Now it looks like he's going to be a first round pick, and all that goes out the window because, like you said, first round pick, pretty much nothing else matters. I can have like when I built this process for running backs, first round picks doesn't matter what the grade is, they hit at 50%. The worst player possible hits at 50%. When you look at the really good players, they hit at like almost 100%. But when you look at like the worst player, they still hit at like 50%, and they are terrible analytically.
Yeah.
So Najee Harris going to the first round, he's going to be he's going to probably be my number one running back, which he probably was anyways. I kind of like Javonte Williams too, though. Like he's growing on me. I don't know if you saw Lance Erline not let it slip. He put a little teaser. He threw 5 profiles up for like an hour the other day. And Javonte Williams is getting the same grade as like Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins.
Oh, wow.
Which I wasn't expecting.
I was not expecting that as well either. That's huge.
That has bumped him and concurrently Harris and ETN, because I suspect they're getting the same or better grades than what last year's 2020 class got. Other than DeAndre Swift, who had a 6.7, I think. Yeah. All the other guys were in the 6.4 range, and Javonte Williams is getting 6.4. So that kind of rose all of the running backs in my eyes, or all those 3 running backs, which are in my top tier.
Yeah.
But okay. So age at running back, when you just filter the 23-year-olds, like the hit rate just isn't good. Yeah. Just like it isn't good at wide receiver, just like it isn't good at quarterback. Like it's just 23-year-olds should already be in college. Mm-hmm. And it's funny. I was just doing my rankings last night for running backs, and what I came across was that Ronald Jones is only like 6 months older than Najee Harris.
Yeah. Najee Harris is a very old prospect.
Like, could you imagine how good Ronald Jones would have been if he had stayed in college till he was 23?
Yeah.
Like, we'd be talking about him like Najee Harris.
Yeah.
So, it's just like, age adjusting is just always going to be important to me. It's intuitive. Like, the older you are playing against younger players, the better you will be. It's like, you've seen that Dazed and Confused movie, eh?
No.
You've never seen Dazed and Confused?
No.
Oh my goodness. So there's a scene in it where Matthew McConaughey says, the great thing about high school chicks is I get a little older and they stay the same age. It's like Najee Harris with his competition. I get a little older and they stay the same skill level because they go to college or they go to the NFL. They don't get better.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just not fair for Najee Harris to, in my opinion, he isn't better than last year's running backs. Like he just isn't. He's probably going to grade the same as Clyde Edwards-Helaire did for me, which wasn't very good. But again, Clyde Edwards-Helaire won in the first round. So he's probably actually pretty good because the film said he's a lot better than the metrics did.
Yeah, I think, similar to you, I didn't have Najee as like my top 3 or anything, but I had him in my top 5 and I had him ahead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think I might have even had him ahead of J.K. Dobbins just because I was really, really heavily weighting like his size and his receiving ability. And from the film people that I've talked to, I'm sure you've talked to many of the same. They freaking love Najee Harris. And if the NFL loves him and if all these people love him, then look, I'm going to give him the pass. He's older, but he also started like a lot older too. So he kind of falls in that like Calvin Ridley type of thing where it's like really weird where they like come in and like he technically has like 4 years of experience. So he definitely has 1 year of experience more than someone else, but he also just like started older. I'm always like, I'm always like weirded out by how to like deal with those types of prospects. It's not like he stayed for like 5 years, right, as like a redshirt senior.
No, he's
Like
just a regular senior, but
yeah,
he
he's just a
started a year late or
yeah,
2 years
exactly.
late
Just
or whatever
started
it
a year
was.
late. But to your point, like that did mean he's a lot stronger and he's a lot bigger than everyone else. So it kind of plays to that. But look, I'm all in on Najee Harris if he gets draft capital, like which it looks like he is. If he goes to Miami, that job is wide open for the taking, receiving, goal line, everything is for the taking. So I'd be all in on a role like that. And I kind of do like that. But that's an interesting note that you gave about Javonte. I definitely was not expecting him to grade that high. So I might have to adjust my stuff once I see Lance come out with that whole prospect, because I didn't have this class anywhere close to the 2020 class from a numbers perspective. I know Lance was pretty low on everyone across the board last year, with the exception of DeAndre Swift, and that proved out to be not really that correct given where these prospects have gone. So we'll take that with a grain of salt.
It wasn't like he was super low though. He just wasn't like comparing it to like 2017's class. Like 2017's class was amazing at everything that I look at.
Yeah.
Like they were head and shoulders above everyone else. Yards created, they were way ahead of the
Yeah.
2020 class.
Wait, it wasn't even close.
What's that?
It wasn't even close.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. And it's like I think 2020 was overblown in some instances. Like I don't think it was as good of a class as a lot of people said it was, but it was so much better than 2019, and it was probably better than 2018 as well.
Yeah.
So it was the best class we'd seen since 2017, but it wasn't anywhere near the 2017 class. Like the 2017 class was incredibly stacked.
Definitely.
Even like when I put day 3 guys through the process for 2017, Marlon Mack and Aaron Jones grayed out as Bulletproof, and it's like how did they go in rounds 4 and 5?
Yeah.
Like that's so crazy.
I mean, like the talent that came out of that class is incredible. And if Kareem Hunt wasn't an idiot, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows where he would have been with that class? I mean, he's still relevant even after doing the stupid stuff. So, yeah, look, it's definitely interesting. I think like 2020 probably didn't have like as great of prospects on the top end. I thought it was just like a nice deep class that had like a lot of good profiles that could profile as workhorse backs, and that alone in itself is rare. Before even accounting for talent, like having multiple workhorse backs available to you, it is very, very rare, as you will see with this class. Once you get into the late first, like early second, you will be begging to go back and draft a running back early, because it is an absolutely brutal bloodbath.
It's funny because like I just said, like the 2020 class was maybe a little overblown, but there was 4 guys in the 2020 class that would have been my running back 1 in 2019 or 2021.
Yeah.
Like it was maybe a little overblown from like there was no Saquon Barkley's, there was no, like even Joe Mixon grades better than everyone in the 2020 class in my process.
Yep.
Alvin Kamara does. Leonard Fournette definitely does.
Yeah.
Like all those guys, Christian McCaffrey, they're all way above the 2020 class.
Yeah.
But that's because they're like the best prospects we've ever seen almost. Like there's so many incredible prospects that 2020 I felt like 2020 was being billed as 2017 again.
Yeah.
And it wasn't.
Totally agree. Let's move on to the position we both love as nerds of numbers, the wide receivers. So, we've talked about some of the things you look at already, right? We have market share of receiving yards. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's basically the number of yards that the wide receiver accounts for divided by the total team's passing yardage. Why do we care about that? Because Dominator is really heavily weighted, not almost, it is 50% weighted to touchdowns. And what we've seen, everything I've seen, I'm assuming everything you've seen, Drew, because I know you don't use Dominator either, that doesn't really translate to the NFL. What really translates is production in terms of the yardage. So that's what we focus on. You mentioned breakout age. That just means the first year that someone, that a prospect hits a 20% Dominator, or in our instance, 20% market share of the receiving yards, right? And then, there's also, we mentioned yards per team pass attempt. Now, what that is you take the total number of yardage that a wide receiver has divided by the total number of passing attempts that the team has. And what that really does is it gives you a sense of market share, but it also gives you a sense of how efficient a wide receiver is with the touches that they do get. So those are some of the main ones that I think are table stakes and that everyone uses. Why don't you give us some insight into what else in there do you look at for the wide receiver position?
with wide receivers, like you said, it's market share and it's yards per team pass attempt. And then I don't actually use like breakout age in its truest sense.
Mm-hmm.
I use age adjusted market share.
Same.
And then,
What
and
is
I'm
that?
still looking for guys that, cross the threshold at 18 or 19.
Yeah.
Because
so how do
my
you use
Bulletproof-
that? Like, how do you use that? Like, what is age adjusted market share to you?
So at age 18, I calculated a threshold, and then I want the players to exceed that threshold at age 18.
Mm-hmm.
At age 19, I want them to exceed the threshold at age 19. The threshold changes based on what other players have done that went on to hit in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And then I like massage it a little bit back in, I forget what year I did it now, 2013 or 2012 or something like that, to like calculate it going forward. I took the average player that hit at the NFL level, so a top 24 season. I took what they did on average at age 18, at age 19, at age 20, age 21, 22, 23. And then I took like a multiplier, I guess, or a factor, and tried to figure out like what was the best threshold to give me the best correlation going forward, more or less. And then I use that as my basis.
Are there any other factors that you actually use for wide receivers, or are those kind of the main ones?
Yeah, so I used to use early declare. That was a big one for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I realized is that the early declares that hit are just the 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
That hit at a advanced rate. So I stopped using early declare more or less, and I just used 21 instead. I want the 21-year-olds. Yeah. And I want them to dominate 2 out of 3 seasons. So that means that if they played 18, 19, 20, and they dominated 2 of those 3 years, they broke out at 18 or 19.
Yeah.
The only option.
Yeah. I think something that's really interesting that I've kind of learned, through following, what is his Twitter handle? Amica, like
Anthony Amico.
Yeah. Anthony Amico. Sorry. Butchered his name there. But I think, all these things like breakout age and early declare and all that stuff, you're like kind of trying to solve for like experience level. Right. So he kind of just threw all that out and said, let's look at like years spent like outside of high school. Right. And obviously it's a negative correlation because the more years you spent in college outside of high school, you're probably a senior. You're probably not an early declare. You're probably old as fuck. So like all those things are negatives and red flags that you and I looked for. And before I would just use like red flags to contextualize that. I'd be like, oh, he's not an early declare, red flag. He didn't break out at age 18, 19. Like, oh, red flag. And, and he's a red shirt, like, oh, like red flag. So I think there's that like one thing is like he's like kind of sold me on the significance of using that. Have you thought about adjusting your approach to kind of look at years of experience so that you can capture guys like a Calvin Ridley who just like came in late and then just dominated once he came in?
Yeah. So I've played around with just like what I have right now. And instead of looking at like still using the age adjusted thresholds.
Mm-hmm.
So like Calvin Ridley at, 20 or whenever he came into college, he still dominated from day one. There's lots of guys like that just dominate from day one, but I still use them at their threshold.
Yeah.
I don't change their grade. It's more just like a context kind of thing for me right now. Yeah. I am looking at in the future, I'm going to build another database using years of college experience rather than using age, and seeing if I can come up with some way to pigeonhole the players like Calvin Ridley and, there's a bunch like Michael Gallup, AJ Green,
Cooper Kupp. Yeah.
Kenny Golladay. Yeah. Like there's so many of them that they just dominated from day one. They dominate 100% of the time. So what I tried to do right now with my current like age adjusted database, looked at only guys that started at 20. And then I looked at the guys that dominated 100% of the time, but they didn't start till 20. It doesn't really give me a better result right now, but I feel like that might be because I'm using age adjusted thresholds still. So like I'm saying, yeah, he didn't dominate the way I would have liked him to at 20 because he was 20 and he's being compared to guys with 3 years experience sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think I need to like go back to the drawing board, start over essentially, and reconstruct it from freshman, sophomore, junior, senior instead, and see what that spits out. Cause I think maybe my thresholds are just wrong. Cause I have seen a lot of people, Jarek Backus is one of my patrons, and he like swears by experience adjusted metrics as opposed to age adjusted. And then even just from like I do devy rankings as well. And without having birthdays, you go down the path of saying that Seth Williams is bulletproof when he isn't bulletproof because he's too old and he just had the wrong birthday because, somebody guessed at what his birthday was based on a Twitter message.
Yeah.
And then you find out later that he's actually going to be a 22-year-old rookie, and you have the wrong threshold. So you said he checked all the boxes, but really he didn't check any of the friggin' boxes.
Yeah.
Because he was older than you thought he was.
That's the path I went down with the Seth Williams as well. Just trying to find these freaking birthdays on Twitter and Instagram and stuff. And, nobody becomes a glorified detective faster than analytics folks when they're trying to find date of births for like devy players. So like one, I want to change because number one, because I think that data shows that we need to change, but two, because goddamn, that would save a ton of time. Just not having to deal with finding date of births. So I'm definitely kind of like on that train a little bit as well, same as you. But let's get in to the prospects themselves. You've been on Twitter going to bat against all the DeVonta Smith truthers, and I see it all the time. So why don't you just give our viewers a spiel? I've talked about it before as well, so it doesn't have to be anything crazy in depth. But where do you have DeVonta Smith ranked, first of all? Wide receiver 3, 4, 5?
I think I got him at 5 or 6 right now.
Okay, so that's kind of where I have him too. So why do you I think to the masses, a guy coming off a Heisman win, going to be a first round pick, most likely, probably a top 20, top 15 pick at the latest. Why are you fading a DeVonta Smith?
Well, I'm fading DeVonta Smith because he's just not really what I'm looking for. Like he had the opportunity to declare last year and he didn't. And to me, there's either two reasons for that. One, he has some personal stuff going on, which fair. Like we all got real lives outside of football. As analyst, I am 100% certain that NFL athletes or college athletes do as well. Maybe there was something going on personally that kept them out of the NFL. I don't know. But typically speaking, good players declare early. He played at Alabama. It's not like he went under the radar. He led that team in receiving as a junior. He put Henry Ruggs to shame. Henry Ruggs was like the 12th overall pick. Mm-hmm. There's no reason that DeVonta Smith shouldn't declare it unless the NFL said, you know what, DeVonta, just hang out for a year. Try again next year. So I feel like he just wasn't on the tier that I was looking for last year. And actually on that topic with Najee Harris and DeVonta Smith, I loved them last year. Mm-hmm. Like they were like guys I was touting. I'm like, you need to get DeVonta Smith in the second round. Like this is the guy you need. Now where it's like, you got to get DeVonta Smith or Jamar Chase. It's like, no, yeah. Like not at all. Like they're not even close. Anyways, DeVonta Smith didn't declare early. He didn't do anything at 18 or 19. He didn't break out till 20.8 according to playerprofiler.com, which is just really not that good. Even people that use breakout age usually use like a 20.5 or a 20. He like nearly hit the 21 mark, which is kind of scary. I don't really care about how good he was this year. Like to me, his grade was already locked in last year. Mm-hmm. Like he was a coin flip last year. He's going to be a coin flip this year. His Heisman Trophy season doesn't change anything. And then once you like factor in that it doesn't college dominator or market share or whatever, it's not linear. It's not like if you have a 50% dominator, you're better than a guy with a 40% dominator. It doesn't work like that. Once you hit a threshold, they're all the same. DeVonta Smith hit that threshold, yay, but he did it at 22. He did it when he's playing against 20-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds. All the 22-year-olds went to the NFL. So, yeah, he had one of the best 22-year-old seasons we've ever seen. Imagine what Justin Jefferson would have done in college this year. Like, no, absolutely not. I'm not into DeVonta Smith from that standpoint. What is impressive with DeVonta Smith is people are right. That is a talented receiving room. They do have 4 first-round picks. He played with Irv Smith, who was a second-round pick. He played with Calvin Ridley, who was a first-round pick. Like, it is chock full of NFL players. But not doing anything for 2 years tells me that he wasn't as good as those other players for 2 years. Mm-hmm. And Peter Howard had a great tweet. I think it was even yesterday. How did he word it? Smart people tell me that his production doesn't matter because there was too many good players. Me, a dumb person, says, oh, so you mean he wasn't as good as other players? Like, it makes sense. Like, he wasn't as good as the other NFL players. The really strong argument from my perspective that I think is accurate is that when I graded Henry Ruggs and DeVonta Smith and Jerry Jeudy, they actually played exactly like what their grades would have been. The Alabama factor didn't have an impact. Jerry Jeudy played like a very NFL caliber player, but not a superstar last year. Henry Ruggs played like a very not NFL caliber player. That's what they graded as. So Now you're telling me last year you're telling me I had to bump those guys because of all these great players in their receiving room. Now you're telling me I need to bump DeVonta Smith because of all these great players in the receiving room, but they weren't great players. They were just
Yeah.
what they were. They're exactly what we'd expect.
Yeah, look, I'm with you there on the competition. The problem I have with like competition and arguments there is like we didn't know what Judy and Ruggs were going to be in the NFL until they got there, right?
Yeah.
You know, people always compare them like, oh, these are 3 first-round wide receivers. I mean, the only close thing to that was when like DeAndre Hopkins and Sammy Watkins and you know Martavis Bryant all played on the same team on Clemson, and they went to the NFL. And you know, Sammy Watkins was like pretty good for one season. DeAndre Hopkins was DeAndre Hopkins, and Martavis Bryant, you know, didn't work out for a myriad of reasons. But at the end of the day, the best player that worked out was a DeAndre Hopkins, right? So the good players still always find a way to produce at the end of the day, at least the elite players. And if you're trying to tell me that I need to take DeVonta Smith, the top 5, top 6 pick in Superflex, I'm gonna say no, thank you. I'm gonna go with the guy that produced at a 19-year-old age, that dominated, that won the same award of the Blitnikoff that DeVonta Smith did, except a couple of years earlier. So, you know, I'm always going to go with those guys. And it's not really, you know, it's not really that I'm fading DeVonta Smith. I'm picking the security blanket that someone like a Jamar Chase gives me, because why would I take that risk when I have so many good prospects to choose from? You know, you go into a car lot and, you know, the car salesman shows you, you know, 4 Lamborghinis. Are you going to pick the one with the flat tire and a scratch on the hood? No, you're going to pick like the brand new shining one, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. There's no holes in Jamar Chase's profile for me. There's no holes in our next guy that we want to talk about a little bit, who I think is you know, he's a sneaky candidate for the wide receiver 1 overall of the class. I don't have him there. I still have Jamar Chase way ahead of the pack, but it's Rashod Bateman. You know, from an analytics perspective, there are no question marks with the Rashod Bateman. He produced as a true freshman, dominated out the gate, playing alongside Tyler Johnson. You can say what you want about Tyler Johnson, but both of them producing to the level they did was incredibly impressive. And every single year, Rashod Bateman produced at a higher age-adjusted level than the year before, which is what you want to see from someone that's staying in college for those 3 years. And then, you know, this year he wasn't going to play. Then he decided to play. So his counting stats don't look that good. But if you look at his market share, his percentage market share, it was excellent. I mean, and then you look at his yards per team pass attempt, dominant. Like this guy was incredibly efficient with the touches that he got. He's incredibly good because he's dominating the team. He was dominating with Tyler Johnson. He's dominating without Tyler Johnson. So like maybe the only question mark is that he plays for Minnesota. He doesn't get to face press coverage much, but based on the digging I've done against into the film community, what I've learned is he is very good at everything from a film perspective as well, whether it's releases off the line, whether it's running routes, whether it's pushing it vertically, whether it's catching the ball in the air. So he's not necessarily elite at any one thing, right? But he's very good across the board. And that is like word for word the feedback that I got last year when I was talking about Justin Jefferson, which is why I ended up moving Justin Jefferson up so high in my ranks, right? So, you know, what is your view on Rashod Bateman? Would you be shocked if 2-3 years from now, Rashod Bateman turned out to be the best wide receiver of this class?
I had Rashod Bateman as my wide receiver 3 in this class for a long, long time, like dating back to their freshman year. I liked Rondale Moore better. And it's not until last month when I finally moved Rashod Bateman ahead of him. And really what it came down to was I was looking at ADOT from Sports Info Solutions.
Yeah.
And Rondale Moore's age 18 season was like 3.04 or something like that. Like it was absurdly low.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, Rondale Moore was obviously incredible, but is that going to be an alpha wide receiver at the next level? Like, I don't know that he has wide receiver 1 potential. Rashod Bateman does. Rashod Bateman is that guy. Like he is exactly what we're looking for. He's my T. Higgins in this class. Like he's a guy that's just people don't seem to love, but analytically he's as good as it gets. He actually has a better profile than Jamar Chase, in my opinion, from an analytics standpoint. The difference is Jamar Chase is probably going to completely annihilate the combine based on some of the stuff I've been reading. And then also he's going to be a top 5 pick, in my opinion. Rashod Bateman might even fall into the second round. So I don't have them in the same tier right now, but I have Rashod Bateman alone in the second tier of wide receivers.
Yeah.
So I'm a big Rashod Bateman fan.
Same here. I was like you. I had Rondale Moore like very high because, frankly speaking, Rondale Moore's age 18 season might be one of the best analytical seasons we've ever seen. You know, ADOT aside, just like the dominance that he showed as a true freshman breakout. He didn't break out the 20% threshold. He hit like 30 something percent in his freshman year, which is just incredibly rare and just incredibly hard to do. And he caught like 110 balls, something like that. So I, for a long time, did that as well. But just trying to put a pulse on the community and like trying to really dig in on the draft media hype and all the talking heads like Lance and stuff, there were concerns from my perspective on Rondale Moore from a size perspective and from a draft capital perspective as well. So I kind of shifted Rashod Bateman up a bit ahead of him like a few months back. I have Jamar Chase in his own tier. I have Rashod Bateman in his own tier because I do think these are the two guys that really stand out to me. And then I have like, Rondale Moore and, someone who you're going to hate, Jaylen Waddle. And then I have like Yami Brown as well in kind of that next grouping with like a DeVonta Smith. So I think it's a really interesting class. You can go a lot of different ways, but Rashod Bateman is absolutely someone that if he snuck up on all of us and he turned out to be like the Justin Jefferson or T. Higgins of this class, I would not be shocked one bit.
Okay, we need to talk about Jaylen Waddle. Why do you have Jaylen Waddle so high? Because I don't get it.
Yeah, look, this is just one of those things where I kind of had to go with my gut, and maybe it's because I'm becoming a bit of a film grinder. I don't know, but I've watched probably more Jaylen Waddle film than I've watched film of any other player ever. And look, it's not a strong case, so I understand there's a lot of holes that can be poked in it, but from a numbers perspective, when he was healthy this year, he was a better receiver than DeVonta Smith. In terms of what he was doing, he was at like 35% market share of receiving yards. DeVonta Smith with 30, and then he freaking had that nasty injury, and he tried to come back and limp on the field for the final game, which obviously was not well advised. I think he's also going to get stellar draft capital, and if I'm looking at it from a new film grinder eyes, he is not Henry Ruggs, because Henry Ruggs is a speed guy by trait, but he is not what I would call a very agile or very bursty guy. Like Jaylen Waddle with the ball in his hands can be very dangerous. Is he an alpha wide receiver in the NFL? Maybe not, right? He could be like a Rondale Moore. But I never comp someone to Tyreek Hill, okay? Whenever people comp to Tyreek Hill, I laugh at them because I say that is a unicorn, and we do not chase unicorns in this world because we do not want to burn draft capital. But if you were to compare stylistically, like the closest thing we've seen to Tyreek Hill is probably Jaylen Waddle. So that's the film side effect to me. And Jaylen Waddle produced more than Henry Ruggs as a true freshman than Henry Ruggs did his entire career, right? Now, what I can answer is the flop that he had as a sophomore year. And I can't go to the too much competition because we know Henry Ruggs wasn't very good in the NFL. And we know Jerry Jeudy is good, but not an elite talent. And as we've discussed now, we think DeVonta Smith is also really good, but not an elite talent. So I cannot explain the sophomore slump. I can't do that, but I am choosing to kind of make a contextual and gut adjustment here just from watching what he can do with the ball in his hands. I actually do think he's very special. So I'm making that type of adjustment. I'm putting him at my wide receiver 4, which, in the grand scheme of things, might not even be high enough, right? To people, they're like, wow, you made this big of a fuss to put him at wide receiver 4. I'm like, dude, this type of profile normally would not crack my top 10. So to me, this is a really, really big deal for me to have him there. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm really clutching on to that like first 4 games. I know it's a small sample. I know there's dangers to that, but I do think that adjusting market share on a per game basis can speak to the ceiling of a player. Now, his floor is below the basement. I completely recognize that part of it. But I think his ceiling is a lot higher than people give him credit for. And I think he's a much better player than Henry Ruggs ever was.
Fair. I agree with you. He's a way better prospect than Henry Ruggs ever was. I actually think if he had played the whole year, he'd end up in my coin flip tier. Yeah. So I don't think it's that outrageous.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I fully understand. I'm totally like kind of stepping out of my analytics zone there to kind of have him there. But that's kind of where I'm at with Jaylen Waddle. I'm really interested by him as a prospect. And look, if anything, if I go down this path and he burns me, look, that's it. I'm never going through this like film exercise, pretending to be a film grinder, film adjustment ever again. But I'm doing it this one time because I just have a feeling. And sometimes, man, you just got to go with your gut feeling in fantasy and just do what's fun. And that's kind of what I'm doing with Waddle here.
See, I got the same thing going on with Terrace Marshall right now. I love that dude. And I want to put him so much higher in my rankings. And I've been holding back, but man, if he gets drafted in the first round, like it's wheels up,
Yeah.
and I'm in, and I don't care what his profile says, because unlike Jaylen Waddle, he was held back by genuine superstars. Like he was
Yes.
held back by Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase,
Yes.
two actual superstars.
Yes.
And then when he got his chance, he dominated,
Yeah.
and then he opted out, which ruined everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like,
You can do like the very similar thing. He probably has a stronger case than Jaylen Waddle if you want to make that type of numbers adjustment, right? If you looked at, I think I was looking at Dominator, market share like through like 3 or 4 weeks. He was leading college football. He was at like 40, 50%. He was catching everything that was coming his way. And then, he opted out, which actually, interestingly enough, which we'll kind of talk about in the devy section really quick, allowed a rising star in the 2023 class, Boutte, to kind of step up and fill that role. So it's silver lining there. I think, one thing I've heard some mutters about like concerns about him in terms of like effort and stuff like that. Now, I don't put like a ton of weight into stuff like this because, you never know, if the source is that reliable or whatever, but I don't like hearing that. So I'm keeping that in the back of my mind a little bit. But if he gets a draft capital, we know the talent's there. He was actually, I think he was either number 2 or number 1 ranked wide receiver coming out of high school, going into college. And I love those types of guys that kind of like, really, really highly touted, goes into college at a really big program and continues to produce. Like, that's why I really love T. Higgins, for example. Yeah, I can totally see the love for Terrace Marshall, and I know a lot of film guys really love him too. But yeah, that I totally understand you there. But let's go on to like really quickly cover the tight end position because we are going on. I'm taking up your entire night here, so let's bang out these last ones. But tight ends. I mean, Kyle Pitts, I'm told, is the generational prospect ever, the best. Not even generational. We'll call him the lifetime award prospect because he is the best thing since sliced bread. He's better than anyone we've ever seen before. He is a total game changer. And I'm hearing this from people I respect, like a Fusu Vu who said he's literally the best. He has no comps from him because he's the best he's ever seen. And I don't take that lightly because I don't think people say that just for the clicks. But what are you doing when it comes to Kyle Pitts in your rookie drafts? Are you taking him? Like some people are talking about taking him at 1.01 in a non-tight end premium. And in a tight end premium, you can forget about it. If you're not spending a top 3 pick on him, you're not going to get him. I promise you that. So what are you doing with Kyle Pitts?
I'm just passing. I get it. He's one of the best tight end prospects we've ever seen. Analytically, he's one of the best tight end prospects we've ever seen. He looks incredible, but he's still just a prospect, and he's a tight end. And at the end of the day, tight ends just aren't that valuable. Like if you get a Travis Kelce, yeah, it's valuable. But if you don't get a Travis Kelce, there's a huge chasm between Travis Kelce and everyone else. And I'm just going to bet the field on that one and say, you know what? He's probably not Travis Kelce. And if he is, oh, well, I'll take the loss.
I think, we have a very similar approach there. I think I'm maybe a little bit higher on Kyle Pitts. Like I would probably consider taking him in like that late first range after like Rashod Bateman and the Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah,
like
so
I got him still ranked in my first round. I'm not taking him in the top of the first round.
Yeah. So those types. I think I will land no Kyle Pitts and tight end premium because I think just generally speaking, people grossly overvalue tight end and tight end premium for non-Travis Kelce, non-Darren Waller, non-George Kittle tight ends. That's just the thing. Like in a tight end premium, what you should really be doing is devaluing anyone that's not a Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, because all it does, it creates a bigger gap between the tight ends of the elite and the non-elite tight ends. So in tight end premium, I'm not going to have any Kyle Pitts. I've already come to that conclusion. I'm going to live with the consequences. But in non-tight end premium, I think I'll probably take a shot. Maybe if in a couple drafts I'll reach up and grab him with like the 1.08, 1.09 or something like that. Ahead of like a Rondale Moore, ahead of Jaylen Waddle or some other top wide receivers. Because I think it's kind of fun to get in on that hype. But I'm with you, man. It's a lot of risk. You're giving up a lot of opportunity cost because even if he produces, right, like He holds value. Maybe he shoots up a little bit, but look at how much value AJ Brown gained from like rookie year to sophomore year. How much a DK Metcalf gained from a rookie year to a sophomore year. How much, like if a Javonte Williams comes out and has a Cam Akers, not even a full season. Look at Cam Akers, what he did for 1/3 of the season. If Javonte Williams comes out and does that, look at how much value he will gain, right? So that's my problem. Is not that I don't like Kyle Pitts, is like the value gain I'm giving up and the trade capital and all the flips in between and all the compounded value gains that I'm getting in between to give up on a prospect like that. So I think you and I are kind of like very much in sync with that on the tight end talk. I was going to talk about Devy a little bit. I just want to get your quick thoughts. Who are your favorite prospects in the 2022 and 2023 classes?
I really like Spencer Rattler, and I don't have a good analytical reason for it other than his ceiling. Just like he just screams elite ceiling to me.
Yeah.
And I love that.
He's like a Trey Lance, but with more experience at like a Power 5 school and like more production,
Yeah.
right? Like just a more proven out version of that.
I'm a pretty big fan of Spencer Rattler. In the 2022 class, I also quite like David Bell. I mean, he's just dominated every step of the way. So there's really nothing not to like about David Bell.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of film graders think he's very good as well, which
Yeah.
I think, he checks both boxes from that perspective. Guy I'm probably higher on than my process will be is Garrett Wilson. Out of Ohio.
Big fan of Garrett Wilson. Just looking at his efficiency from a yards per team pass attempt perspective, he blew the fuck up in his second year.
Everyone did there though. Like Chris Olave had an absurd one too, didn't he?
Yeah, but Chris Olave was a junior, so that's a big difference.
Yeah. Granted, that's accurate. But they're the same age.
Yeah, that's true. But it goes back to my thing.
You're the experienced guy, though.
I don't care about age as much. I care about the experience. So Garrett Wilson is huge. Like,
what about life experience? They're the same age, man.
Yeah. What about 2023?
2023, I quite like. I don't even know how to say his last name. Keyshawn Boutte. Boutte. I don't know.
That's what I've been calling him. Keyshawn Boutte. I'm imagining he's from the French Quarters, and there's some sort of French accent in there. I don't care if I made that up in my head, but that's what I'm going with.
And then there's some guys like Parker Washington. Like I love Parker Washington. I've never heard anybody speak about him. Like when I do my devy rankings, I always kind of like stress test against other people's rankings because it's a little bit foreign to me. Like I'm not a college football fan per se.
Yeah,
I don't follow college football closely. It's not really my forte. So when I'm like falling in love with Parker Washington, I'm like, okay, well, where does everybody else have him ranked? Like where's he going? Nobody has him ranked, and I don't really get it.
Dude,
and I'm sure it's coming, but
I think people just haven't dug into it yet. Like I started digging in like this past week, and I tweeted about him as soon as I found about him. Like, dude, Parker Washington, true freshman breakout, 21% of market share receiving yards, 5'10", 205, thick boy out there. Top 5 in yards per team pass attempt out of Power 5 wide receivers in the 2023 class. Lots to love about Parker Washington. I'm a big fan. He's like firmly in my top 5. I think he's in my top 3 right now for the class as I was doing my devy ranks. And then I started watching some stuff on him too, and the guy runs like a freaking truck. And as you expect, he's thick. He's hard to bring down. People are raving about that returning senior who I don't even care about at Penn State. I'm going to be all eyes on Parker Washington for me. And I think, people that get in on him early, there's a lot of guys in the 2023 class that broke out as a true freshman. And that's going to be super valuable, I think. Just, and people are not going to really know about it from a counting stats perspective, but the analytics people that kind of identified it early on, we're going to be able to capitalize on like a Parker Washington, like a Boutte, who actually people know more about, but even like a Quentin Johnston from TCU. These are all really, really interesting guys. And I'm pumped. I am pumped about the 2023 class. I have already started acquiring 2023 picks. I acquired like 2 or 3 of them in my Superflex leagues last weekend. So I'm just going to keep going down that path. So it's good to know that you and we're going to be I think we can put our first stamp of approval. I have a nice little receipt there from February 17th, 2021. So you and I will come back to this video when Parker Washington is a top 3, top 5 wide receiver in the class, and we can say, "Hey, man, we found the thick boy first. That's our boy." All right, so I'm gonna round it out here with some fun questions. I got a couple for you from me, and then I'm gonna pull a couple from Twitter as well. But first up, I think everyone wants to hear the answer to this. Not that you've berated this point and made yourself very clear and very articulately to me, but why do you hate Jonathan Taylor, and why was he not a generational prospect?
I don't hate Jonathan Taylor. He's bulletproof. He's one of the best prospects in the class. He's just not one of the best prospects ever. Like when you stack Jonathan Taylor up to Saquon Barkley, it's not even close.
Yeah.
Like it isn't even remotely close. The only thing that makes it close is their size and speed. That's where the similarities end. Like from a yards created perspective, Barkley was like absurdly higher. And when you factor in offensive line, Barkley's was absurdly worse. And when you factor in pass catching, Barkley was absurdly higher. And like you just go down the draft capital, you second overall to third running back taken in the second round of 2020 draft. Like there's just no way that Jonathan Taylor stacks up even close to actual generational talent. Is he a very good prospect? Yes, absolutely. He's, I think, 10th or so in my my new process. He's really good. He's just nowhere near generational.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I had JT as my 101. I kind of held him through that, even through that first stretch of the season when he looked absolutely awful. But I agree with you. Like, it's not generational. I think we just tossed around that term too much. I mean, when Saquon Barkley stepped on the field, we already knew what he was. Like, in his first game, he was making NFL guys look like high schoolers. So, that's to me what generational is. And it's very hard for me to sell someone as a generational prospect when, all 32 teams passed on you once and many of them passed on you twice. Right. So those are a couple of factors that go in. I think it's a very fair thing, but look, people love to hate on you for it. And, it's funny. So that's why I bring it up. So let's talk about
Can we just take one quick second?
Yeah.
I would just want to point out that there is nothing worse in this like industry than hating your favorite prospects. I love Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
But I can't get on board with where he was being drafted in startups last year. I can't get on board with him being talked about as a generational prospect. Like him and Cam Akers were like identical. If that's identical, then they're definitely not generational, because I don't think Cam Akers is anyway generational.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like AJ Brown, like I loved AJ Brown as a prospect. And then now he's like wide receiver 1 overall. And I'm like, you guys, like he can't be that high.
Yeah.
So I'm like in the Patreon, like, hey, like you guys need to sell AJ Brown. I'm sorry. Like I know I told you originally go get him, but like this price is absurd. Kyle Pitts is another, like, yeah, love Kyle Pitts. His price is absurd. There's nothing worse than that in this industry. I hate having to fade players that I actually like.
So let's take a couple questions here from our guys on the Twitter. So let's see. First up, from Daniel Forsha MD. It's a doctor here, so he's at Daniel_Forsha. The Konami quarterback has certainly changed quarterback valuations, but has the pendulum swung too far by undervaluing Mac Jones in rookie drafts, despite strong passing/processing traditional QB skills? What is your view on Mac Jones?
I'm coming around slightly on Mac Jones, but he's still distantly my quarterback 5 in the class.
Mm-hmm.
He will probably remain my quarterback 5 in the class. He offers almost no floor without rushing ability at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just nothing there from that perspective. He's a complete zero. He needs to be one of the best passers of all time in order to be a fantasy like winner at quarterback.
Yeah.
Like he could be Kirk Cousins, which just isn't going to be what I'm looking for with where some people are talking about drafting him. If anybody's putting him above Trey Lance, I don't even want to talk about it. It's completely nonsense.
Yeah.
Trey Lance doesn't even have to throw a pass, and he's probably going to outscore Mac Jones.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, right? Like if you're drafting a statue quarterback, you better be damn sure they are like the next like Drew Brees, Tom Brady, literally going out there and getting you like 40 touchdowns. And Tom Brady went out there, got you 40 touchdowns. Guess what? He was QB 11. So
yeah,
that's like we're just in a totally new age, and there's going to be more of these guys coming in. Spencer Rattler, we talked about him. He is a dual threat quarterback. So, and then you talk about 2023 class, DJ, the big dude at Clemson. He is a dual threat quarterback. So colleges are drafting more and more dual threat quarterbacks. They know it works, and players are becoming more and more dual threat because they know the NFL works. So there's just going to be more and more talent at the position. And I said it before and I'll say it again. Like, the Konami code is not going to be a luxury like it was in the past. If you don't do it and you don't go after the type of quarterback that provides you rushing floor, you're going to be left in the dust. So it's going to be a bare necessity going forward. So that's kind of how I view it as well.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. It's like it was a luxury and now it's a necessity.
Yeah.
Like that's absolutely perfectly said.
All right. Next question from Nick Van Brunt at Nick_Brunt. When in a rookie draft, how much does position depth affect strategy? With all of the talent at wide receiver in this draft class, is it good strategy to draft the shallow positions, QBs and RBs, in an attempt to leverage others who lack at those positions? What is your thought? You know, we hear it all the time. Draft talent, don't draft situation or position. You know, positional stuff shouldn't matter. Draft who the best player is on the board. What is your view on that?
I don't necessarily agree with don't draft positional. I think you don't draft bad players. I think that's a given. Like, I don't draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire at running back 1 because he got drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs. That would never happen. But I moved Clyde Edwards-Helaire up a hell of a lot when he was, drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs, just from a positional standpoint. Now he's a first round running back. He's got a very high percentage chance of hitting. And first round running backs that hit are they can win you your league. So he went ahead of all the wide receivers for me when he wouldn't have if he didn't get drafted in the first round by the Chiefs. So from that perspective, I don't think positional doesn't matter. I think drafting bad players doesn't matter. Like, so in the 2021 class, I'm drafting Chase above the running backs because I don't think Chase is going to be a good wide receiver. I think he's going to be a phenomenal wide receiver. So I'm getting an elite ceiling with Jamar Chase. With the running backs, I'm getting a sketchy floor and a mediocre ceiling. Mm-hmm. I don't see any of them being top of the league type running backs at any point in their careers. Jamar Chase, I think, can be a top of the league wide receiver as soon as year 2. And I think he can be a wide receiver 2 as soon as year 1. Like, it's completely different from that perspective. So positionally, I think it matters to some extent. But then once we get into these, like I really like Elijah Moore. I really like, I like DeVonta Smith to some extent, but like these guys are like wide receiver 2 prototypes, right? Like they're not going to be fantasy league winners. So I'm going to take the running backs I like less ahead of them because, like we were talking about earlier, the hit, like the magnitude of the hit matters. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering the question right, but I prioritize elite ceiling typically, and then I prioritize positional value, and then I prioritize safe floor, if that makes sense at all.
I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, I've talked about this before as well. I do really care about positional value at the top of the draft. I think anyone that says that they don't care about it, I mean, I don't know what type of fantasy you're playing. Maybe there's no roster requirements, but at the end of the day, it's going to matter to someone. And if it doesn't matter to you, it matters from a resource scarcity perspective. The reason why I tend to lean running backs and I tend to lean quarterbacks early is because you can trade them a lot easier and a lot sooner. And I can take those gains and flip them back into, getting wide receivers or whatever it is. So that's really kind of my approach. And there is nothing I hate more than having to reach for a running back in like the late first and like early second when there are like really, really good wide receiver prospect profiles, someone like an Elijah Moore, or someone like a De'Ami Brown that are just like, or even someone like a Terrace Marshall that are just sitting there staring me in the face, right? You don't want to make the Keyshawn Vaughn mistake that everyone made because they're like, oh, wow, I went with the best wide receiver early on, but now I need a running back, so let me get the Keyshawn Vaughn. Like, that is not the mistake. I would much rather you go out and reach on a Najee, and I know Drew has Chase and ahead of Najee and ahead of Etienne, ahead of Javonte, but I would much rather you go and reach on a Najee or even like an Etienne or Javonte to kind of swing, because if they hit, man, it's going to be a big impact hit, and there's a chance that you can get a pretty decent enough wide receiver to backfill on the back end. So if I had to choose, I would much rather reach early on a little bit for the running back so that I never have to reach in the later, and I just take the value wide receiver that falls. Because like every year, someone takes a Devin Singletary, someone takes a Keyshawn Vaughn, someone takes a Zach Moss, and they're like, "Damn, this guy's really good." And I'm just like, "No, that guy stinks. You should have taken T Higgins. You should have taken like Laviska Shenault. Even you should have taken like a lot of guys. But don't chase shitty profile running backs because it's not a pretty scene. And Drew, you know the hit rates more than anyone, but those types of profiles for running backs, it's brutal.
Yeah, I pretty much don't take running back after round 1. Like if
Yeah.
it's not a running back good enough to be drafted in the top of the first round, like top 6,
Yep.
I'm done on running back pretty much for the rest of the draft until we get to like round 4. And then if I can
Yep.
grab a lottery ticket that is in a sketchy situation where he might find his way onto the field, then yeah, I'll take a running back then. But in that like second round, especially late first, second round, those are those are traps.
Yeah.
Those are absolute traps.
Yep.
And that's where you get your good wide receivers. Like there's always good wide receivers available in that range.
Yep.
Which is one of the reasons, like in startup drafts, I typically focus on running backs first because I know if my team is good, I can still draft good wide receivers.
Yeah.
I'm still going to have late first round picks. I can still get more good wide receivers.
Yeah.
If I don't have running backs, it's near impossible to get them because you need to pick early to get a good one, or you need to get lucky, or you need 2017 to come around so you can get a bunch of good ones in the Alvin Kamara and Kareem Hunt in the late first, early second. Those are the only profiles I'm interested in that range. Yeah. And they wouldn't be in the late first, early second if they weren't in the 2017 class.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're gonna find guys like T Higgins. You're gonna find guys like Justin Jefferson, who's now like the a top. Some people have some dynasty wide receiver 1 overall, for example, right? And we're gonna find guys like that because analytically we're focused on the right things. And someone's always gonna draft a Henry Rook. Someone's always gonna draft a DeVonta Smith and is gonna push those guys down. So yeah, I agree with you. You can be a contending team and really fill that wide receiver position. In my opinion, I know people say it's a hard position to fill. I don't think so. I think we have enough tools at our disposal to increase our hit rates enough to be successful. And Drew's shown that as well. So I'm totally with you on that one. And last question, this one's going to be from me. Who is the best player you've ever played with for fantasy? And who is the worst player you've ever played with in fantasy?
Who's the best player I've ever played with in fantasy?
Other than me, obviously.
Because
I'm the champ.
Other than you.
Yeah, other than me.
There's a guy named Dynasty Moose, I think is his name on Twitter. I actually worked with him, and we're in 7, 8, maybe Dynasty leagues together. And he beat me in the finals, I think in 3 or 4 of them. And we co-own a team together in which we lost the finals this year.
Wow.
He is as good as anyone I've ever played against. And nobody knows who he is because he's not on Twitter very much. Like he never tweets. He's not an analyst. He's just a guy that I used to work with. He's incredible.
All right. Well, shout out to Dynasty Moose, Ryan T at Dynasty Moose on Twitter.
Oh, you even know who he was.
I just looked him up. So, all right. So that's the best player. I've actually found that as well. Like some of the best players that I've played against are in like multiple leagues with me, and they're not analysts, right? I mean, I'm not an analyst either, but like they're not on Twitter and like really active in the scene. And then like honestly, some of the worst players I've ever played against are all analysts giving out advice, which is why I say like on Twitter, like be careful who you're following, like who you're playing with. Which brings me to my next point. Like, who is the worst player you've ever played with in fantasy football?
Oh, that's I don't want to say.
You don't want to say?
No, I don't know who's the worst player. I've played with some players that make some very questionable decisions from time to time. I don't really like to call them out though, but
all right, well, that's the Canadian.
Let's leave it at that. I'm Canadian. That's not in me.
Yeah, I left that shit behind me. So y'all know who I think is the worst player I've ever played with. So we'll leave that at that. But before we leave, Drew, please let the people know where they can find you, how they can support your work, and how to engage with you.
All right, so I'm on Twitter at DF Bean Counter. That's where I do most of my stuff. I actually just started a podcast we're 2 episodes in to the Bulletproof Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm having a ton of fun with it. It is, it's like a short podcast, going to be 20, 30 minutes. We talk about 2 or 3 players per episode, kind of put them through the Bulletproof process on the first player. And then we kind of just touch on the next players. It's been fun. I'm looking forward to episode 3. I think episode 2 was a lot better than episode 1. So we're on a very steep incline, I guess.
Love that. Two dots is just two dots, but the third one's gonna make that a trend, man. To the moon.
Oh yeah.
Once you guys release that third one.
And then you can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/dfbeancounter. That is where I do all of my analysis now. If you're looking for like who I specifically like, I rarely will do a prospect or a player thread on Twitter anymore. It's more process related. If you're looking for what does that process lead to, it's all on Patreon. I do dynasty rankings, devy rankings, cornerstone rankings, rookie rankings. I have 3 different sets of rookie rankings out right now. 1 QB, 2 QB, and then 2 tight end. So you can get a full spectrum from that perspective. That's pretty much it.
All right, you guys.
Oh, and I got a rookie guide coming out probably in April sometime.
Oh, nice. Awesome. So you guys heard him. I'll link all that stuff in the description. You can hop on over, support him on Patreon, subscribe to his new channel, follow him on Twitter. You know, he does put out really, really cool threads on process with a bunch of like diving gifts. If you hate diving, you'll probably hate them. But if you don't hate diving, then you'll probably definitely get into them like most of us and just become a lot better dynasty players. Drew, thank you. I know this episode ran like basically it felt like the whole day, but I think there's a lot of good information in here for the viewers. So thanks for sharing and giving us insight into your process. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm sure I'll have you on again at some point in the future. If you guys like the episode, again, make sure you subscribe, hit the thumbs up, support your boy, drop it in the comments. Tell me why I stink. Tell me why Drew stinks. We'll try and get better. But if you just troll us, we'll probably just ignore you. But if you give us really constructive feedback, more often than not, you know, Drew's open to it and I'm open to it. So let us know what you think. And that's all we got for you this week. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Market Watch Mondays. Make sure you tune in for all our weekly film, our NBA Top Shot series. Me and Noah are making fucking bank. So make sure you tune in for that one. And just stay tuned, man. We got a lot of content coming your way. All right. Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.